absolutely convinced that there will be books written 10, 20, and 50 years from now about the period of time from about November of 2010 till about Labor Day 2011. In other words, right now, this period we're in. Why do I believe that? Because of the unprecedented financial situation we are in. I don't want to go deep into economics here with you, but I want you to understand why, in part, we are where we are. You know, it was right after the elections last year, when President Obama when he went to Korea. He went to Korea on a trade mission, and while he was there, he said it was his goal to double exports of the United States in the next 5 years. Sounds great. It'd be wonderful if it happened. But you see, there's a problem in selling American goods and services overseas. It's when we have a strong dollar, because it makes them that much harder to sell overseas. And so, in part, to help deal with that problem, there was something they called quantitative easing, a program that was developed in which the United States Treasury effectively, once a month, we used to say prints money out of nothing. This is the 21st century. They don't print it anymore. They just hit the button, digitize it into existence. Each month they would send $60 to $80 billion to the Federal Reserve. And the Federal Reserve would turn around and buy the debt of the United States government. Now, before we get to the debt issue, please understand what happens when the government hit that button every month. It was putting money into the money supply that otherwise wasn't really there. And so it had the effect of driving down the value of the dollar. What did I say about the exports? If we want to sell more exports, it's a good thing to drive down the value of the dollar. And sure enough, we began exporting a little more and a little more and a little more. But it's a double-edged sword. You see, not only when we drive down the price of the dollar, is it easier for us to sell goods overseas and products overseas. Unfortunately, the other edge of that sword is stuff we import goes higher and higher in cost. And what do we import a lot of? Oil. Indeed, up to 65, 70% some months of our oil is imported. When that guy in the Middle East says he wants $100 a barrel for his oil and we give him $100, but he quickly finds out it's really not worth $100, it's only worth 98, guess what he does? He raises the price. And so tomorrow he wants 102 and we give him 102, but wink, wink, nod, nod, a couple days later that 102 is worth something less. So he raises the price of oil again. And we get into this dog chasing its tail scenario. If it was just limited to oil, it probably wouldn't be that big a deal, but guess what? The cost of the price of oil and energy is a component in the cost of everything. Everything. And so we got into this inflationary mode. And that's bad. The price of oil kept going up and up and up. You saw some, in fact, I was in DC one day during that time. I actually saw for the first time gasoline more than $5 a gallon on the pump. Around here, I saw it in Indiana as high as $4.55. And then in May, the United States government announced at the end of June, 16 days ago, they were going to do away with the quantitative easing program. What's happened since the middle of May? The dollar's firmed up. Price of oil has gone back down. But now there's a new question. The United States Federal Reserve was out buying all that debt the federal government was creating. Now the question is, who's going to buy the debt? Because they're not getting that $60 to $80 billion every month. Who's going to do it? You know, for the first time in our history, more of the U.S. debt is owned by foreigners than it is by the United States citizenry. And the Chinese have already said, belly's pretty well full of U.S. debt. We're barely 16 days past the end of quantitative easing 2. And it's yet to be seen as to who is going to consistently belly up to the bar to buy that debt. And by the way, if the government needs the money and they can't get it, what do they have to do? Raise the interest rates, exactly. And when the interest rates take off, we'll look at a $14.3 trillion debt as the good old days. Again, I hate giving a speech that is perceived to be trying to motivate people in fear, because that's not why I'm doing this. I'm doing it, I gave myself the pledge years ago when I stepped from the business world to get behind microphones like this. I gave myself the pledge that I always tell people what I think, not what they want to hear. What's going to happen now with the debt limit between now and, say, Labor Day? I cannot predict, none of us can. But I do believe this scenario I'm going to paint is one that might be possible. You know, we've seen all of the credit rating agencies say for the first time ever, unprecedented, that they may downgrade the United States credit. Never happened, ever. Never. I wonder, would it be possible? Because it's not required by law. Everyone thinks, well, if they don't raise the debt limit, the first bills that are going to be paid are the interest and the principal on the debt. That would make sense. It's good business. That way you minimize any effect on your debt rating. But it's not required by law. Is it totally unlikely that this administration might say, well, you know, I'm going to look at those bondholders. I think those bondholders are greedy speculators. They were making money off the hardworking people of the United States of America. So they're going to have to make a sacrifice. They're not going to get back the 100 cents on the dollar. Does that sound a little familiar? I've seen this movie before. It's called the General Motors bankruptcy, and it was called the Chrysler bankruptcy. Some have even suggested that because there's no real priority list, it's possible where the government could say, well, we're not going to pay off the American holders of the debt, but yeah, we're going to pay off the Chinese. That's called picking winners and losers. We've seen that before, too. Is that scenario going to unfold? I don't know. But the problem is, this is a problem that's been kicked down the road for far too long. I want to leave you with one mental image before I open it up for questions. When your little printer runs out of paper at home, you go to Office Depot, you go to Staples, you buy, let's say, 1,000 sheets of paper. It's 4 inches tall. 1,000 sheets, 4 inches tall. How high would 1 trillion sheets be? I want to take a shot. The answer is 46,000 miles. We're dealing with 14.3 trillion today. And it will likely be raised to something in the 16s to 17s. The question is, will there be cuts? Will there be a requirement that we have a balanced budget? Will there be caps put in place? Let's hope so. But we don't know. With that, I would be glad to open up for questions, and I appreciate the chance to be with you all.